Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Garth Spencer Show. If you enjoy these videos, please do subscribe. I'm on YouTube. My topic now has to do with memory. One of the more embarrassing revelations of my life has been that my memory isn't what I think it is. My brother thinks that I've got a photographic memory. I don't. It's more like a steel trap, rusted shut. I discovered the hard way at work that any job procedures I learn, I'm going to forget if they aren't repeated more often than once a month. More and more, I've been thinking about the role of memory in our lives and how very little some people have learned about how to pay attention, how to remember, and how to verbalize what they know. I think each of these is even more fundamental than some of the reading, writing, and arithmetic skills that were classic in Little Brown Schoolhouse. But because they're so fundamental, we take them for granted. In my experience, they weren't taught. Maybe things have changed in the curriculum that the children around me are learning. I'm an old man. There's been plenty of time for things to change. I still find adults who they're shockingly unaware of things that happened even an hour ago, much less a month ago or longer. This comes up in the kind of work I do when I'm transcribing dictation from insurance adjusters who are often dealing with some rather severe traffic accidents, and sometimes years past the event. If people don't remember things clearly within a few days, how do we expect them to report on them accurately years afterwards? It's a question. Now, contrast this with things that we know about history. Contrast this with the fact that we know there were professional rememberers in places like Europe and Africa and the Near East who, without any literacy, would remember contracts, remember letters, remember finances and calculations, and did this entirely orally. There's an ongoing, persistent legend that before the Christianity reached the British Isles, the Druids, the Celtic priest class, would spend 20 years not only learning an enormous amount of poetic lore and oral literature, but the skills to remember it all. 20 years. Orally, entirely in memory, without writing things down. From several accounts, this was a class that actually had an abhorrence for writing, at least anything they considered important or holy. Now let's consider the contrast between that and the modern day. We tend not to pay much attention to or recall things unless they're recorded on record, preserved in writing. And even then, we can be challenged if we don't know the key words to look for. This suggests that if anything happened to our written and especially electronic records, we'd be hooked. The writer Paul Anderson wrote some very well thought out science fiction about what would happen after a limited nuclear exchange around the world. He presumed that a great deal of our technical knowledge would survive, but what do you do with that when you don't have a lot of the resources, either mineral or renewable, that our civilization depends upon? That casts an odd light on the civilization we have. Are we cutting determinedly away at our resource base? What are we going to mine or smelt or reuse, reduce, and recycle in 100 years' time, let alone 1,000? And how will the information to do so survive, let alone the technical expertise? There's a great deal that we depend upon that isn't written down. It's basically experience that people learn in the trades and crafts. Take farming, for example. We may be very vulnerable in the simplest and most widespread of crafts, simply raising food from the soil. Because it's so expensive to become a farmer, it's so hard to turn a profit if you're a farmer. Nobody chooses to become a farmer if they can avoid it. The average age of farmers has been steadily increasing in North America because who's going to take over a farm, let alone battle to save a family farm from corporate agribusinesses? There's not a lot of incentive if you have any alternative. So it is with the arts of memory and the many things that we try to record. Will it be enough? Now consider something that Paul Anderson never thought of. What we do record is often on very, very transient media. A perennial story that keeps cropping up in the news now and then is that the electronic media we have don't last very long, certainly not a lifetime. Even the paper on which we write is very often very given to dissolving if there's a high acid content. You have to search to find low acid papers, and they're expensive. So the arts of memory, such as memory is, will be our fallback. My problem with that is that both I and the people around me do not know, do not remember what they have said and what they haven't, and often get very pissy when anyone calls them on what they've omitted or what they haven't noticed. An ongoing theme of my own life is people accuse me of not paying attention, not using my common sense, when I simply did not hear or do not recall hearing any instructions, or the instructions are full of holes. People omitted to think things that are just too obvious for them to remember, or they really thought they said what they didn't. Now, you could go into all sorts of psychology about this, like an imperfect theory of mind, people not realizing how much of their memory is not shared with other people. Or, more seriously, you can ask how ineffective someone's attention is. Mine, for example. In that case, oral literature or a record of the skills or the legal knowledge or even proverbs can be either essential or they can be critical omissions. Consider what's happened to the society that we're in. It used to be taken for granted that, of course, as a matter of common humanity, you have some common courtesy for others, you have a sense of responsibility, even a sense of being honored if you took on public service. But over and over again, we hear horror stories about authorities ranging from Canadian Mounties to American servicemen to elected delegates on both sides of the border who use everything and everyone around them as a source of profit or personal gain. It seems as though the sociopaths have taken over. The people who never heard or never took seriously the concept that they are obligated to others. How does that get passed on at a critical moment when people can learn? Or does it even matter if there's always a certain proportion of sociopaths born in every generation and succeeding through their manipulative talents to middle management, public service, the chief executive positions in the private and public spheres? Is it just a matter of exposing people to the simple proverbs of our culture, to remembering and repeating our values, or are we contending with people who just won't listen? I put it to you. I don't know how to settle this. It's just a problem. This has been the Garth Spencer Show, and I hope these videos will be interesting to you and you'll want to subscribe. Thank you. Bye.